Favorite five. Favorite five. Favorite five. Favorite five. Welcome to this episode of Our Favorite Five. I'm your host, Jack, and my guest today is
Rob Harper.
Today's subject on Favorite Five, our favorite five comic books of all times. Pretty open-ended.
Series, I think, not just whole comics, though.
Pretty open-ended.
Are we going to have some arguments about if that's
If you want to get a fist fight over comic books, that will bring this show
If I was going to fist fight over anything, that would be what it would be.
A low point of Vinland Old Time Radio. We're on our fifth, sixth season, and...
Seventh. We're on the seventh season.
Seventh season. Dear God, what have we done with our lives?
Yeah, it's pretty sad.
Yeah. So, today, our favorite five comic books. And, Rob, what is your fifth favorite comic book?
My fifth favorite comic book series, or storyline, is from 2000 AD. It was in 1982, but I didn't read it then. I read it much more recently. It was Judge Dredd: The Apocalypse War, written by John Wagner and Alan Grant, and Carlos Esquera. He's a famous Judge Dredd artiste. He drew it, and it is the Judge Dredd story where Mega City 1 gets blown up for the first time, and it was a classic, and it is, if you're going to read a Judge Dredd story, this is one of the ones to read. Another one might be more the, it's kind of overdone now, but the coming of the Dark Judges, with Judge Death and Judge Mortis, and those guys, but this one, it kind of sets up that, because after this is when that happens, but this is fun times. The Sov state nukes Mega City 1, and Judge Dredd goes and gets some revenge. It's a classic storyline.
Okay. Have not read it.
It's a classic. I have it in graphic novel form. I should let you borrow it because it is great.
Okay. My fifth top five, my favorite five, House of M.
House of M is a classic series.
Marvel comic
really
books.
Classic, but it's great.
Yeah, it's not too old, but it's not too recent.
It was in the 2000s. Yeah, 2005, 6 maybe.
Yeah, it's say 10 years ago.
Yeah, maybe not even that long. Might be more recent. Actually, it's not 10 years ago. It's no way it's 10 years ago. It's probably 5 years ago.
5 years ago. Yeah.
Yeah.
The long and short of it is, it was a very enjoyable alternate reality type. First of all, anytime muties, those dirty muties get killed, I enjoy that.
Except for they became the leaders. So.
But I'm a fan of Scarlet Witch. Always have been. I've been a Avengers fan.
She is the catalyst of all that.
West Coast Avengers. I like the storyline. I like how spoilers. I like how it's not everything what it seems at the end.
And it ends in a major change for the X-Men with the No More Mutants.
A world-changing ending. So it has a lot of the what-if elements of it, like who's left and what they want to do and what they want to do to repair what Scarlet Witch did, and the change at the end, why she did it.
And I do love when Magneto is in charge and a good guy.
Yes. Except for you're not supposed to know he's a good guy.
Yes, but hey, spoiler alerts. I told what happened in the Apocalypse War.
Yeah,
so.
Magneto wasn't behind it. Everyone assumed so at first.
It was actually Pietro.
Yes. So, my number 5 was House of M.
And there's actually another major change, is that's when Wolverine found out about his past. Because afterwards, he remembered everything.
Yeah, I hated that.
They created some more interesting stories with Wolverine, though.
Yeah.
Because Wolverine was getting a little stale by then.
Yeah. Anyways, your number 4 of your favorite comic books.
Speaking...
Fave 5.
Yep, 1981 this one is from. Speaking of dirty muties, it is Days of Future Past, not the terrible movie. Well, it wasn't. It was an alright movie, but this is Chris Claremont and John Byrne's famous classic time travel story where Kitty Pryde, or actually it's Kate Pryde from the future, she's living in a dystopia where the Sentinels have imprisoned all the mutants and killed most of them, and all the humans too at that point. And she gets her consciousness gets sent back to the past to prevent a evil group of mutants, the Brotherhood, from killing a senator and causing this whole thing to go through.
Causing the blowback that did result in the Sentinel program that does cause the future that she's living in.
And I love time travel. This is the first classic X-Men time travel story. And it does introduce people like the Phoenix, the second Phoenix. Rachel Summers is in it. And people like that, and Wolverine gets turned into a skeleton by a repulsor blast from a Sentinel, which is always great.
And it has some of the most iconic images that I know of the X-Men.
In front of that
the wanted posters
yeah,
with the dead
cover,
written across it, and okay, so we're on the same page there.
That is a classic.
It didn't make my list, but I certainly could see it, and I would maybe even put it on as a contender for.
Yeah, that is one of the most famous X-Men storylines ever, probably. That with like Dark Phoenix Saga and things like that. What is your number 4?
My number 4 for favorite comic books. When I was a kid, my favorite thing to buy whenever I could find it, flea markets, anything, was DC's Who's Who.
Oh, classics, yeah. And also the Marvel version of the Marvel Universe version.
I had not ever gotten any of those, but the DC...
I was a Marvel guy.
I used to flip through those and read. It had their story condensed into a page of text.
Yeah. And all their stats.
It had a storyline. It had where they were from. It had who their villain was, Nemesis, if they were a good guy, a bad guy.
Yep.
Endlessly enjoyable, learning about different people from around the DC universe, and I used those to pick up comic books. I learned about the Vigilante on that, and I loved him. One of Batman's foes, who was a vigilante just like Batman, who was a lawyer who couldn't get the job done legally, and the two of them, obviously, you'd think team up, but hated each other because they were both vigilantes, and they both thought the other one was too vigilante. Like and I really enjoyed that, and that's my top 4. I got hours of enjoyment out of that.
Like I say, the Marvel Universe ones, I poured over them so much they fell apart. Like, I read them so much. Because they're like books, really, because they're full text. Like, it's not comics, they're text.
Yes.
And it's just, you read through them. They were classics, those. I love all this. You learn about all these heroes that you never read the comics, but now you know their histories.
The Joker has such a convoluted, and it's been touched here and there, but it had at the time, canon Joker origins, and I was like,
imagine if they did it now. It would be so confusing because what's real and what isn't real.
Yeah, you couldn't do it anymore.
Yeah, those were great.
Okay, so your number 3 in your favorite 5 comic books of all time.
This is from 2000 AD once again, but it's not Judge Dredd. It's from 1987 and went to 1990. Was Zenith or Zenith, if you want to pronounce it that way. And it's by Grant Morrison, before Grant Morrison was huge in Grant Morrison. And Steve Yoel was the artist. And it was a classic superhero story, like almost kind of a kid superhero story, but then it ended up him versus like the Cthulhu mythos pretty much. And it was by Morrison. You know, Morrison's crazy, but it was before he was unreadable.
Oh.
So it was the perfect confluence of Cthulhu mythos, superheroes, and Grant Morrison's super genius.
At his prime, before he thought he was a witch?
No, he probably still thought he was a Chaos Mage at the time, but it's just now he's just too heady, and he kind of gets lost in his concepts. But this was like the perfect...
He gets lost up his own ass real quick now.
Well, you could say that. That's a little rude.
I did say it.
But still, it was perfect Grant Morrison at the time. And once again, I have all the graphic novels, so if you ever want to read it, you could read it.
Okay.
They just came out with hardcovers, and they're nice. It was never reprinted until recently.
Because I have not, so...
It is a little more esoteric, but it is a classic story. And there you go. That's my number 3.
My number 3 is something called Deadshot: The Beginnings.
Deadshot. You love Deadshot.
I loved Deadshot as a kid. I liked his story arc. He was not a rogue with a heart of gold as...
Well, he is Will Smith, so that is Will Smith's character.
That is true. So, yes, I expect to see him smacking his lips audibly and mispronouncing words through one series of misadventures and another as he's dressed like Shaft in a terrible movie.
Anyways, but this Deadshot...
This Deadshot is the original Deadshot who was an assassin for hire, but he had a moral code.
Assassin with a heart of gold.
He was exceptional at it, but he also had his own set of rules that he played by, and he's a fantastic character.
Pretty fatalist.
I think I was Deathstroke the Terminator almost ended up in this slot.
I just started reading Deathstroke the Terminator's whole series. And
it almost ended up in this slot. I had to go with Deadshot. This series was a 4-part that I had in the individual comic books. Then you one year got me the trade paperback, which had all 4 plus 2 other Batman stories that were inside that a crossover. So it was, I think, the Deadshot story to read. And if you have to see it in film, Arrow does.
Yeah, Arrow Deadshot was great.
Arrow does a fantastic Deadshot.
Until they wasted him.
Until they had to kill him so that he didn't remind people that Deadshot was a white guy with a code of honor, but
and
instead,
only one eye.
Instead, it was Will Smith.
So, in conjunction with your number 3 pick, my number 2 pick is Suicide Squad from 1987 to 1992, written by John Ostrander. And this is the series that the movie should be, and Deadshot's a major character in it.
Beginnings was an Ostrander.
He's a great writer.
Yeah, so right there, I agree with you. And I have a lot of those Suicide Squad comic books still in my possession. Very good.
Yeah, we discussed it on
on Fillers
or Jack and Rob Save Hollywood. One of those.
Jack and Rob Save Hollywood. We can't stress enough that
this is what the movie should have been.
Yes,
and it's all character development, and it's amazing writing by Ostrander. Ostrander also did Martian Manhunter and The Spectre, and both those series, all 3 series are totally different, but amazing in all different ways. The Spectre is all about religion and God, and like Ostrander, he trained to be a priest early in his life, so it was all that kind of stuff. Suicide Squad's much more action, adventure, and then Martian Manhunter is more mental, kind of like you're dealing with Justice League character, like major character in Justice League, so it's a lot more like legendary kind of stuff going on there. Great writer, he could write anything, and that's why he's number 2 with Suicide Squad.
Very good.
Yes,
I agree wholeheartedly. And as a honorable mention, Suicide Squad. There are some storylines that I really enjoyed that would have made my list if this is a top 10 for sure.
Yeah.
My number 2 was the crossover that happened when I was collecting comic books in my youth. Acts of Vengeance.
It was. X-Men were really involved in it that much, so I never really read it much because I was an X-Men guy at the time.
Acts of Vengeance was what happened when the prisons that had been created by the various prisons from each title were people escaped, all the criminals, and it was basically what happens if this guy's arch enemy met someone else's arch enemy.
Yeah, it was from Marvel.
And it was from Marvel, and you got to see there was the Negative Zone that had a prison in it that people escaped from. They had, and eventually you would see like the Wrecking Crew fighting, like teaming up, fighting other people,
random people. Yeah, wasn't it Magneto fought West Coast Avengers or someone, or the Avengers? One of those. It was a Magneto versus the Avengers of some sort.
Yeah, and just it was right when I was collecting comic books, right when I was learning about who people were and where they stood. And it turned everything on its ass, and I really enjoyed it. It was a very good Hank Pym story as well. So my second is Acts of Vengeance, early 90s.
Yeah, very early 90s, probably 91, 92.
When I was West Coast and Avengers were my main go-to Marvel titles. It was fantastic.
Fun times.
And now, on Favorite 5, we stop for a brief commercial message. We'll be right back.
Vinland Old Time Radio.
It is to laugh.
Astro!
Ahoy there, dirigible.
It's a gavel, a haunted gavel.
Have you read The King in Yellow?
Africa's a continent?
It's with great protest. Ooh, now that's a fine program.
VinlandOldTimeRadio.podbean.com.
And welcome back to Favorite 5, your number 1 of your Favorite 5 top comic books of all time.
Yes. Are you going to guess, or you...
I have written down what if it is on your list, I will mock you for.
Okay, so we'll go for the... for number 1 for me is obviously X-Men. But it was Uncanny X-Men 229 to 253, so it's 1988 to 1989, right after I started collecting X-Men, and it's when they were in Australia. Nobody likes this series when they're in Australia. It is my favorite series of X-Men. It's Chris Claremont, Mark Silvestri before he was super famous, and it's my X-Men. It's the height of the X-Men, the team for me. It was pretty much, they were stuck in Australia. It's just character development. Havoc's the leader. I always loved Havoc more than Cyclops. Psylocke wasn't an Asian ninja yet. She was a British woman. And,
so she wasn't Olivia Munn yet?
Yep, she was an actual character, not just a bathing suit. And she was just cool. And it was just a great storyline of X-Men hiding out in Australia, and eventually their downfall when the people that they're hiding out in their base come back and rip them a new one. And it ends my favorite series of X-Men, my first great period. And that's why I like who's on a team. It's Rogue, Colossus, Havoc, Psylocke, Storm. Like, those are the central X-Men for me.
Oh.
And, and Wolverine, obviously. And it ends with them finding Jubilee, and Wolverine getting crucified. And, what more do you want?
I have not read it, but your build-up by saying no one likes it.
No one likes it.
I may not.
No one likes it because nothing happened. I like it because nothing happened. It's just them hanging out. Once in a while, the girls go on trips to a mall in Sydney, and that's when they find Jubilee. Jubilee hitchhikes, jumps back through the portal with them. And it's just fun times, them hanging out after it takes place between Fall of the Mutants, where all the mutants get supposedly killed, and leads into Extinction Agenda. So
I had on your list that I would mock you for if it made it on your list was Transmetropolitan.
I forgot about Transmetropolitan. Transmetropolitan would definitely be in my top 10. 100%. I love Transmetropolitan.
But you dodged a bullet there.
It would be in my top 10. I totally forgot about it, but I would be.
I was prepared to mock, but okay. As your number one, controversial by Muty Lover standards, but
probably,
still.
Yes.
My number one, as controversial, if not more controversial, as well as kind of timely, Age of Ultron.
Age of Ultron, really? You literally liked it that much?
I liked Age of Ultron.
The comic series, not the movie. Well, you like that too, but...
I didn't mind the movie, but...
the comic series is totally different from the movie.
The comic book...
Time travel-y.
Which is good. One of my favorite all-time characters in Marvel, Hank Pym. Very misunderstood, and it shows the last few panels of that series where... If you don't know, Wolverine thinks to end this...
Wolverine and Sue Storm, of all people.
This alternate timeline that happened where Ultron does take over the world. He succeeds. They can't stop him. He's killing heroes.
Well, it's not even an alternate timeline. It is the real timeline. But they have to change the timeline.
They have to change it. And so the only way to do that, Wolverine thinks, is to kill Hank Pym before he creates Ultron. There's no other way. They go back. Sue Storm tells... Wolverine, you can't. Just tell him not to build Ultron.
Yeah.
This will be bad. And if you understand Hank Pym, the way he's been portrayed, his mind, and Wolverine says he can't help himself.
He will do it no matter what.
He will. And I knew he would.
Yeah.
And they tell him not to. The timeline is changed enough that it doesn't have that.
Yeah, he still builds Ultron now.
But he still builds Ultron, and it shows his past, and it's I love him as a character because he's always felt...
Well, he builds something into the Ultron, so it's like a little safety device or something, doesn't he?
He's always been, like, top 3 smartest. When he made himself Ant-Man, he didn't want to be a superhero that fought, but he always got made to be, everyone was, well, you have this power, you have to fight.
Yeah,
and he's
you just was like, I just want to invent.
I just want to be an inventor. And the last panels are him when he was younger, and he's in this corporate lab, and they're like, you have to do this, you have to do this. And as a kid, it showed him making all these fun things, these toys, these very whimsical things. And in the end, he's in this very sterile environment, and they're telling him he has to create this, and he creates something very whimsical, and he has a smile on his face, and you realize he's not inept, he's not evil. None of this was on purpose. He was just a guy who was pushed to do things that he didn't want to do through, Tony Stark.
Manipulation.
Everyone had manipulated. All he really wanted to do was invent something nice.
And also that's a major series because in the series, Wolverine goes back in time, and he ends up, there's 2 Wolverines.
Yes.
Later on, Wolverine's killed. This other Wolverine supposedly killed him because there could only be one Wolverine.
They showed it off screen,
but he may not have killed the other Wolverine, allowing now it's all changed. But that was a loophole. They could have allowed Wolverine to come back. Now with the whole Secret Wars, it doesn't matter. It's all being rebooted anyways. But that would have been a nice way to bring him back. Was he never killed his other self? So there's 2 Wolverines running around.
Yes. So for me, that was my number one. I thoroughly enjoyed it because it showcased a lot of my favorites.
It's interesting because I wouldn't think of it as a number one, but I can see why you liked it.
Honorable mentions What do you have for honorable mentions?
Honorable mentions are definitely Transmetropolitan. Thanks for reminding me.
Okay, so I get to mock you for that? Because that was pretty...
That's a
pretty
great series.
Asinine.
Amazing series. It's like Hunter S. Thompson in the future. Yes. Hellboy, especially the first series, Seed of Destruction. V for Vendetta, Preacher. Like, these are all major ones. Neither of us had any Alan Moore on our top 5. But I also had Mutant X, which is Havoc gets... he was a leader of X Factor for a long time. He got supposedly killed, but he actually got transported to an alternate reality where he remembered his past, but everybody thought he was this other person, and there was a whole other team, and it was really fun. And it was supposed to be like a 6-issue series, but it was so popular, amazingly, that it went for 32 issues. And everybody was like, wow, why is this popular? But it was a great little series in the 2000s. So what are your honorable mentions?
Civil War. I know a lot of people hate it, but again, it was pretty Avengers. Like, you could go Avengers versus X-Men as...
I like Civil War way better than Avengers vs. X-Men.
But Civil War, Preacher...
Because Avengers vs. X-Men, Civil War... Well, I guess they both had the same problem. You're supposed to think both sides are right.
Yeah.
But neither of them... It was always one side was more right than the other.
Preacher.
Preacher's a classic.
Preacher's a classic. You can't...
Yeah. It is what it is. And it's going to be a TV show. Will it be good? Who knows? It looks like it's by fans, at least. That's helpful. It's not just corporate. It's no DC, even though it's owned by DC.
That's true. And last but not least, Mr. Miracle by DC.
Scot-free.
Scot-free, early 90s.
Yeah, never read any of those ones.
It had the quaint charm of the Justice League International, where, there's the Blue Beetle, Booster Gold comedy aspect to it, but also had a dynamic between a strong female lead and a male character.
Big Berta.
Yeah, it had a lot of things, and I was collecting that as a kid, and it was thoroughly enjoyable as a DC, not taking itself too serious, fun, and I really enjoyed it.
What about Justice League International back in the day? McGuire's art and...
Yeah, I have a bunch of those.
Oh, that was an amazing series, too.
And last but not least, Alpha Flight, which I have...
Oh, yes, Alpha Flight. As a good Canadian.
I have hundreds of them. And I liked the stories. And as a conclusion, it is Avengery enough with the way that some of the characters are, but also X-Men-y enough with the way some of the other characters are.
It's definitely X-Men.
It was a meld. Anything that you liked from either of those types of things, where they're like kind of gods on Earth, like to
working for the government
and on the other end, tainted human beings with like personal dramas and stuff, like
Northstar
more of character interaction.
That's why I love when Northstar came out as gay in like the X-Men comics. It's like, and if you read Alpha Flight, you knew he was gay for years, like from 1982.
Yeah. So those are my honorable mentions.
And that was another episode.
Thank you for joining us for Favorite 5.
And we'll be back some other time for more favorites.
That is this edition of our Favorite 5. Favorite 5 has been brought to you by Finland Old Time Radio Productions. Thank you for joining us. I've been your host, Jack. Thank you, and good night.
I like Lamp. You know what else I like?
I'm thinking that there's some sort of copyright on just saying I like Lamp.
I like scatological porn.
Ho-ho!
That escalated quickly.
That escalated quickly 100% of the time.
VinlandOldTimeRadio.podbean.com. Ripping off Anchorman whenever we can.
Ooh, that rhymes. Trademark.